Okay, what if I told you that, like, significant hair regrowth could happen in just 6 weeks?
Wow.
Yeah, and not with some, heavy prescription, but maybe something you already have in your kitchen.
Really?
Or, get this, that one common type of hair loss might be linked to being low in just one specific amino acid.
Mm.
Apparently, it was found in over 90% of people affected in one study.
90%? That's huge.
Right. So have you ever looked at your hair and just wished it felt thicker or maybe looked shinier, or just please stop shedding so much? Could the answer, or part of it anyway, be in like simple food changes or natural stuff?
It's definitely worth exploring.
You shared some really fascinating material with us focusing on these natural ways to boost hair health. Things like specific foods and remedies that really stand out.
Yeah, things highlighted for their potential impact.
So our goal in this deep dive is to kind of cut through all the noise, pull out the key insights in this info, and help you understand how nutrition and maybe some natural methods could be, well, powerful allies for healthier hair.
Exactly. We're digging into the practical wisdom here. Like, what are the nutritional cornerstones? Are there hidden factors, maybe specific deficiencies playing a role? And what natural remedies are showing, well, pretty surprising results, according to the studies and info we looked at.
Okay, let's dive right in. The material you sent points to certain foods being like real powerhouses for hair. It calls out 4 specifically, and the first few might not be what you'd immediately think of.
Absolutely. I mean, general healthy eating is obviously important, right?
Yeah.
But these sources really emphasize specific foods that deliver targeted nutrients crucial for both, hair structure and growth.
Got it. So first one, bamboo shoots. Not exactly something on my weekly shopping list, but why bamboo?
It boils down to silica. The info highlights bamboo shoots as being incredibly rich in it. And silica is presented as, well, essential for building keratin.
Keratin, that's the main hair protein, right?
Exactly. Think of silica as the scaffolding. It helps make hair strong, but also flexible, elastic, so it prevents that annoying brittleness and breakage. And the sources also mention it's good for skin, joints, bones, too, which kind of makes sense if it's a core building block.
So silica builds the hair, makes it tough but flexible. Got it. Okay, next up, wild-caught salmon. We mostly hear about omega-3s with salmon, which are great, but what's the specific hair connection here?
Omega-3s are definitely good, yeah. But the material really zooms in on the vitamin D3 in wild salmon. It links vitamin D3 to improving a whole range of hair loss issues.
How so?
Well, the key idea presented is that vitamin D3 might actually activate dormant hair follicle stem cells right at the root.
Whoa, activate stem cells?
Yeah, potentially wake them up. And if it does that, it could directly increase hair density. So if thinning hair is a concern, getting D3 from sources like wild salmon is definitely something highlighted.
Activating stem cells.
Huh.
That sounds pretty fundamental. Okay, and then we have egg yolks. We hear about eggs all the time, but why the yolk specifically for hair?
Egg yolks are just, well, packed with nutrients. The material really breaks down why they're so valuable. Biotin is probably the most famous one here.
All right, biotin for hair.
Yeah, it's presented as absolutely essential for making keratin. Getting enough biotin apparently helps strengthen the hair shaft itself, stopping it from getting thin, fragile, and breaking easily.
Okay.
But the sources say yolks offer more than just biotin. They've got fat-soluble nutrients supporting growth and structure. And interestingly, cholesterol.
Cholesterol, isn't that usually seen as bad?
Well, the material suggests it's a precursor for hormones needed for hair's natural shine and luster. Plus, there's sulfur described as kind of like the soil for a healthy scalp and hair. And yeah, more vitamin D again. Reinforces its importance.
Okay, so bamboo for silica structure, salmon for vitamin D3 activation, egg yolks bringing biotin, sulfur, other key bits. That's a solid lineup. But the material builds up to one food it calls the most important for hair.
Yes, one food really gets the spotlight for its sheer nutrient density relevant to hair, and that's grass-fed liver beef or lamb liver specifically.
Liver, okay.
Yeah, and the language used is pretty strong, calling it the absolute most concentrated nutrient-dense food and saying it has virtually every single nutrient in very high amounts.
Virtually every single nutrient. Wow. Okay, so what are the critical ones in liver for hair, according to this info?
All right, let's tick them off. First, iron. Super important for getting oxygen to your scalp. The material actually points to iron deficiency as a really common reason for hair shedding. And importantly, the iron in liver is heme iron. That's presented as way more bioavailable, meaning your body can actually use it better compared to iron from plants or, many supplements.
Right, easier to absorb.
Exactly. Then you've got copper and zinc,
Right.
and the right ratio between them is key. Copper helps iron work properly.
Oh, right.
And zinc is highlighted as critical for preventing DHT buildup, that's the testosterone form linked to hair loss. Plus, zinc's needed for actually forming hair and making proteins.
Oh.
There's also a mention that copper, working with folate and B12, which liver is also packed with, might even help reduce graying.
Reduce graying. Seriously, that's a nice bonus.
Isn't it? And the folate and B12 in liver are noted as being in a really highly usable form. Oh, and it also points out if you're low in copper, you can become iron deficient because the iron won't work right. So getting both from liver helps that balance.
That makes sense. What else?
Liver also has retinol. That's the active form of vitamin A. This is presented as essential for vitamin D to do its job correctly, and also for regulating sebum, your scalp's natural oil. Keeps hair moisturized, not dry.
Okay.
And yes, biotin's in there too, reinforcing its role in hair structure, making hair thicker, stronger, fuller looking. The material definitely suggests getting biotin from liver is better than popping supplements.
So iron for oxygen, copper, zinc for hormones and building, folate, B12, copper maybe for graying, retinol for defunction and scalp oil, plus biotin for structure. Wow, it really does sound like a multitasker based on this info. But what if you just can't stand the taste of liver?
Yeah, that's a fair point. The material suggests options like taking liver capsules, you can find those easily, or trying to cook it differently, like mincing it really fine and cooking it with lots of onions to mask the flavor.
Okay.
And there's a note that you don't need huge amounts, typically 2-3 ounces a couple of times a week, is apparently plenty to get these benefits without overdoing it.
Right. So we've covered that foundational nutrition from these power foods. But the material also digs into potential underlying deficiencies, things that might be silently causing hair loss.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one specific amino acid that really stood out.
This was a particularly striking point, yeah. One source mentioned a paper that found a specific amino acid, histidine, was deficient in over 90% of people with alopecia.
Over 90%. Wow, that's an incredibly high number. What exactly is histidine and why is it so important for hair?
So, histidine is involved in a bunch of stuff, immune reactions, inflammation, healing. But for hair specifically, it's involved in making keratin, again, for strength and hydration. And it also helps regulate copper and zinc levels, which, as we just said, are crucial.
Okay.
But then the material asks, why might this deficiency be so common? It mentions things like medications, alcohol maybe, but a critical point highlighted is low stomach acid.
Low stomach acid. How does that connect?
Well, if your stomach isn't acidic enough, you just can't properly break down proteins and extract amino acids like histidine from your food, no matter how much you eat.
I see.
The sources even suggest that maybe using something like betaine hydrochloride could help increase stomach acidity if that's suspected to be an issue.
So it's not just what you eat, but if your body can actually use it.
Exactly. Absorption is absolutely key. And the material adds that histidine needs helpers, cofactors to work properly. B6, that right copper-zinc balance again, and folate.
Which brings us back to the foods.
Right back. Dark leafy greens are a source of folate, sure. But the material keeps reinforcing that liver has the most folate in that good form.
Gotcha.
And there's a caution mentioned about taking folic acid supplements, the synthetic form. It suggests it might actually interfere with your body using the active natural folate because they kind of compete.
That's a really important distinction to make.
It really is. And, to underscore folate's importance for cell health generally, the material makes this pretty dramatic comparison. It notes that DNA damage from folate deficiency can be comparable to damage from radiation.
Wow, seriously. Radiation damage.
Yeah, it really highlights how vital it is for protecting DNA, especially in the mitochondria, which is also relevant for things like cancer prevention. So its role in cell growth, like the fast-growing cells in hair follicles, is pretty profound.
Okay, that comparison definitely hits home. So besides liver and leafy greens, where else does the material suggest getting these cofactors like B6, zinc, copper?
It points to other animal proteins like beef and fish. And for those key minerals, zinc, copper, selenium, other trace minerals, shellfish get a big mention. Things like shrimp, scallops, crab, lobster are highlighted as excellent sources.
Okay.
Oh, and just one final point in this section, a brief note that prolonged fasting could potentially trigger hair loss if your body isn't really ready for it or fully keto adapted, suggesting maybe that approach isn't right for that person at that time.
Right. Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered building hair from the inside with nutrients, tackling potential roadblocks like this histidine thing and absorption. But what about, like, direct help for the scalp? The material you shared also looks at topical remedies.
It does, yeah. And one natural topical remedy really stands out, onion juice.
Onion juice.
Onion juice. It's presented as a potential solution for various kinds of hair loss autoimmune stuff like alopecia patches, hair loss tied to nutrition, or even problems from like fungal overgrowth or dandruff on the scalp.
Onion juice. Okay, I have to ask the obvious question. The smell.
Huh. Yes, the material is practical. It totally acknowledges the smell. It actually recommends washing your hair twice with shampoo after you use it to help get rid of the odor. So yes, smell is a factor, but the potential benefits presented seem pretty compelling.
Good to know there's a plan for dealing with that. So, small aside, what makes onion juice potentially effective, according to these sources?
The key things highlighted are sulfur and a compound called quercetin. We mentioned sulfur before with egg yolks. It's a basic building block for keratin.
Right.
Quercetin, though, is described as having several powerful actions based on this information. It's said to help suppress autoimmune attacks involving T cells. That's really relevant for conditions where the immune system mistakenly attacks the hair follicles.
Okay, interesting.
It's also said quercetin can increase hair follicle growth hormones, basically telling the follicles to grow. And it acts as a potent antimicrobial. So it could protect the scalp against things like yeast, fungus, mold that cause issues like dandruff and can hinder growth.
So it's hitting multiple angles, potentially immune issues, growth stimulation, cleaning up the scalp. How exactly does the material suggest using it? What's the process?
The basic method outlined is pretty straightforward. Use organic red onions. They apparently have higher quercetin. You peel them, chop them, blend them up.
Okay.
Then strain the liquid through something like cheesecloth to get just the juice. You can put this juice in a bottle, maybe a squeeze bottle for easier application.
Yeah, man.
To apply, you wet your hair, then massage the juice right into the roots and scalp for a few minutes. Leave it on for about 30 to 60 minutes. A shower cap can help contain it. Then rinse really well and shampoo twice to tackle the smell. The recommendation is to do this twice a week, and the material suggests you might start seeing noticeable hair growth after maybe 3 or 4 weeks, but recommends sticking with it for 4 to 6 weeks or even longer for best results.
And is there actual, like, study data behind this simple remedy?
Yeah, the material shares some pretty compelling results. It mentions a study from the Journal of Dermatology. They compared applying onion juice twice a day to just using water.
Yeah.
After only 6 weeks, nearly 87% of the onion juice group saw significant hair regrowth, compared to only 13% in the water group.
Wow, 87% versus 13% in 6 weeks.
Pretty dramatic difference, right? It also mentions a mouse study where just quercetin alone led to hair regeneration. So those are pretty strong outcomes presented for something so, well, accessible.
Nearly 87%. That's genuinely remarkable if that data holds up. But the sources also suggest you can take this even further, like supercharge the onion juice.
Exactly. 2 ways are mentioned to potentially enhance it. First, adding about 5 drops of rosemary oil to the onion juice before you put it on.
Rosemary oil, okay.
Yeah, a 2015 trial is cited that compared rosemary oil directly to a leading alopecia medication and found the rosemary oil was equally effective. It contains phytonutrients that are anti-inflammatory, antioxidant. They stimulate blood flow to the scalp, which is great for feeding the follicles, and are considered good for autoimmune issues too.
Interesting. And the second way?
The second method is a bit more involved, fermenting the onion juice.
Fermenting it.
Yeah. You peel, chop, blend, strain the onions like before, but then you put the juice in a jar with some water, about a teaspoon of sea salt, and maybe half a teaspoon of raw honey. Mix it up, cover it loosely like with cheesecloth or coffee filter so it can breathe but keeps bugs out, and let it sit and ferment for 72 hours.
Fermenting. Why go to that extra trouble? What does that do?
Well, the material explains that fermenting basically magnifies the benefits. The microbes doing the fermenting actually create more vitamins and nutrients, so it potentially increases the potency of things like the quercetin. It also makes the pH of the juice more acidic, down to around 5. And that pH level is described as being very therapeutic for the scalp's natural environment. It's acid mantle. The application after fermenting is the same massage in, rinse, shampoo twice.
Got it. So we've looked at building blocks from these specific foods, tackling potential underlying issues like that histidine deficiency and absorption problems, and then using these potent topical things like onion juice, maybe boosted with rosemary or fermentation. It really feels like the material offers a multi-pronged approach to hair health.
That's really the core message that comes through, I think. This deep dive into the information gives you specific, actionable insights, not just, vague advice. Understanding the roles of specific nutrients, thinking about potential internal factors, and having natural remedies with some compelling data presented. It empowers you to consider different paths for supporting your own hair.
Right.
Because navigating all the health information out there is tough, right? Hopefully, pulling together the key points from these sources makes things a bit clearer.
It really does help connect those dots. Diet, internal health, what you put on your scalp. Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, here's maybe a final thought to leave you with, something that kind of emerges from all this. We talked about vitamin D3's really deep role, even mentioning ideas about potentially high doses or sun exposure. It just highlights how interconnected everything in our body really is. Something like vitamin D, which we mostly link to bones, turns out to potentially wake up hair follicle stem cells. It just suggests there are probably so many more hidden, vital connections between our overall systemic health and things like hair growth that we're maybe only just starting to understand and uncover through research.
Absolutely fascinating potential there.
Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into natural approaches for hair health. We really hope you found these insights valuable and maybe even empowering.
Yeah, we really appreciate you listening and digging into these materials with us.
And hey, if you found this deep dive helpful and you want to explore more topics like this with us, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us reach more people and share these kinds of insights.